So in this particular video, I am going to show you how you can perform UI automation as a citizen developer using StudioX. So first of all, I'll show you what is the end result that we are driving through this demo, and later I'll showcase the step-by-step recreation, how you can do it with me. So first, I'll just run the workflow. So as soon as I've run the workflow, it has opened the Chrome and it has gone to this website. It provided the email and password and it logged in into this application. So the most common and very frequently used scenario for any UI applications is logging into it, right? So first of all, in order to recreate this, we should understand what are the manual steps involved behind this. So to keep it simple and easy, I'll just show you how you have to think in a perspective that you can drive your own automations. Like today, if I'm teaching you, like if you're building something tomorrow, you should be able to think and build your own automations. So, how you can start it? So, first imagine the manual task that you're doing. How you do it? Like you open the Chrome, right? So, you navigate to the URL of the site. First step, so let me just put it like steps. So it will be easy for you to understand and to replicate that into automation steps if you put your manual steps here. And then after you open to the site, open your application, you enter username, right? And then you enter password and later you click on login button. So I'm just trying to explain a very small basic use case. And then on top of this, we can implement the complex one also. So in order to navigate to the site of, to the URL, to that particular site, we will be navigating through the URL of it, right? So if I just create from the scratch, let me just create from the scratch. So take a blank process and Acme login. I'll just give the name as Acme login and then create the workflow. So it's quite simple if we just put it up and understand why we are using these activities, properties of that, and when to use which activity. It will help us to actually create more complex workflows. So once after you come and log in, open your particular task, I'll just show you. First thing, what is the first step that we are doing here? We are navigating to the site. That means basically we are opening the application, right? Whatever the application that we are going to use, we are opening that application. So for that, we have an activity called use application. Okay. We are opening the application, right? So just pull this into your workflow. So this is the place where we build the automation, right? So pull that, drag and drop it over here. So, and after you do that, you have something called indicate application to automate. So that means you have to keep your application open and you have to first indicate it on the screen. So basically, whenever we are doing the UI automation, the robot will interact with the elements on the screen, right? It takes the address of the elements that are available on the screen, and every time it tries to perform the same action. So now when I say indicate application to automate, click on this and indicate on the screen which is the application that you want to automate. So if you want to do the service now, open that. If in this particular use case, I'm taking Acme test site, right? So I'm just indicating on the screen and I am just clicking on it. That's it. So the browser, the robot will take all the browser information. So if you see here, it has got the information. It is using the Chrome browser, and this is the particular URL it is redirecting to. So you have to understand what it is doing by clicking on that particular application, right? So it has taken all this information. Perfect. So now what we do, I'll quickly show you what this particular um, activity is doing. So I'm just clicking on run. So what I suggest is every single time you use an activity or you take a certain step, try to run it and see how it's working so that you will clearly understand what is the output of that activity. right? So if you see, it has opened and it has closed also. So now here comes the learning point one. So if you just go to the properties and if you observe here, it has opened, it has closed also. So now what I'm going to do, there's an option called close, right? I'll keep this to never. Okay, I'll keep this to never. There are multiple options. If you see, it is never, it is always, if opened by app or browser, right? So there are multiple options. I wanted to keep this to never because I want to see the output. Once after it executes, I want to see whether the application got opened or not. I don't want this to be closed automatically, right? So just run the workflow now. Now, if you just see, it has opened and also it did not close it. Perfect. So now let's go and see. So the properties are really very important. If you see, for every activity you drag and drop, there will be a specific activity related, a specific property related to that particular activity. So for browser, what all the things that you need: opening, closing, and resizing the windows, right? So these are the different types of activities, that properties that you need for a browser. Similarly, for next, like what will be the next step, I'm just going to see in my notepad. Enter username, right? So you should enter the username. So where we have to enter the username, this is the place, right? So you should enter the username here. So what will be the activity that I have to use in order to enter the username here? So let's go into the activities here and check them out. So what we do, we type into that particular field. So type into will be the activity. So if you see, there's a type into activity. Just pull that into the scope of this. So it's very important. You should not pull this activity. If I just take it out of, so it actually need, you are again have to indicate the screen. I mean, like you have to indicate the application. You have to use the, if you see there's a error, right? This must be inside the application or browser. Otherwise, you have to attach a browser, right? So this has to be kept inside this particular scope. Basically, we call it as a scope. That means whenever you're trying, so let's say for manual, if I just have to relate it to what we do manually, so in order to enter the email, you have to go to the application. Similarly, to perform any of the UI activities like type into or click, whatever the UI or activities that you perform, you should use them within the scope. So that's why we are keeping it inside it. Okay, and then now we have to indicate the element, right? So where you want to type this username, right? You want to type the username where you actually want to type it. Click it to indicate, and if you see here, this is the place where you want to enter your username. So select this particular field. So if you're observing here, after I select it, it is collecting all the information and it is providing. So if you see here, if I am highlighting over here, it's showing as target, and if I highlight over here, it's showing as anchor. So what is target and what is anchor? So the main location or the main selector that we are using to perform the activity is called as anchor. Sorry, is called as target. And whatever the supporting elements that are there. So let's say this is the text field, right? So the text field is here. you, there is one lot of elements around it. So if I provide an anchor, it will be a base, it will be a strong supporting element for the target, right? So just remember the concept this way. Whatever the main location or the main area that you want to perform an activity, that is called as target. Wherever the supporting elements are there around that particular target, those are called as anchors. Okay, the anchor should be unique again. So if you select the password, that cannot be that can also be, but however, if this and this are there, so we are trying to enter in the email field, right? So if you select an email as an anchor, that will be a strong supporting selector for that, right? So just you have to, if you click on validate, it will be validating the selector, and also it will show you whether it is a, if you see here, it will say validation is successful, and it will also show you the percentage. 100% is the score. That means there is no other duplicate or which is having the same selector combination. Okay, and then click on confirm. Perfect. So now we have selected the selector where you wanted to enter the username. Perfect. But you also have to provide what is the username, what you want to type into that particular field. I mean, the information that you want to type, the email, right? So that thing I will just show you how we are getting the username and the password from the assets. Okay. But before to that, let's go into the next one. So we have performed this thing, enter username. And later, the next one is enter password, right? So for entering password, again, we are doing the typing activity. So we have to take type into. Let's pull the type into and then indicate in the Chrome. Here we have to select the password. Click on this and it is automatically showing the anchor. We can confirm it. Perfect. So we have selected username and the password. And now let's go and perform the next action, which is click on login button. So as the name itself says, we are doing the click action, right? So let's take the click activity. It's basically not so complex. If you try to put up your manual steps, it's very easy to replicate them into automation steps. You just have to understand what I'm going to perform next and what activity I need in order to perform this step, right? So just take the click activity and then same thing indicate on screen on the login button. So perfect. So we have collected all the selectors and we have confirmed that these are the areas that I'm going to perform the automation steps. So we have done all these automation steps. So if you just try to put out or you against this particular manual steps, like what all the activities that you have used. So for navigating to the URL, we have used use application or browser, right? So that means in order to open any of the applications, we have to use this activity. And then enter username. For entering, right, we have used type into, and this should be within the scope of this. For entering password, again we use type into because it's the same enter activity. And then the click. So for clicking on the login button, we just use the click. So it's quite simple, right? So we know what activities we have to use. So let's say in future, if you want to perform any UI automation, these will be the mostly 70% use steps, right? So now let's get into the next part, which is entering the username and the password. So as I told you, in order to enter the username and password, I should get the values from somewhere, right? So as we all know that username and password are very secured information, confidential, right? So in order to save it, I am using a concept called assets. So let me just open my orchestrator. So if you're not sure what an asset is, basically it stores the information in a secured way. So whenever we are trying to use any credentials, we can save in multiple ways. Like you can use credential manager, you can use assets. So there are multiple ways, right? So one such way is assets. So it will help you to save the credentials, and let's say you are using any variable information, like let's say the URL or any information that tends to change with time. So you can put them in asset, and without touching the code, you can manipulate them from here. So going forward, if the scenarios comes, I'll explain about the variables more clearly. But however, we can concentrate on credentials over here. So I'm going to create a new asset to show you how we will use that. So let's say I'm going to create something called as Acme credential. Okay. And then if you see, there are different types of the credentials. So, sorry, there are different types of assets. So in this example, we are going to use credential. What is the username that I'm going to enter over here? Your credentials, right? So you provide what is the username that you want to enter and the password. So if you see, the password will be encrypted. Okay. And click on the create button. So once after you click on the create, you can see the credential, the asset got created. So now you have to do just utilize them into your workflow. Sorry, just use them, call them into your workflow and utilize that in your automation. So how you can do that? There is again, so if I just put one more step over here, create asset and use it in workflow, right? So for that, what activity we are going to use now? So as I told you, it's a credential. Just try to put up the words which you know, right? So there's something called as get credential. Okay. Otherwise, if you do cannot think of credential, there's something called as get username or password, right? So you can just use this particular activity called get username or password. So you I want you to think before I answer you this question. So all of the activities I just kept inside. But this particular activity I just kept outside this and somewhere in front of it. So I want you to take a second of pause and think, why did I place it inside this? And why only over here? Okay, so I believe you might have thought and come up with your answers. So, first of all, the thing is, I am using it before this and I'm not keeping it inside the scope is because it's not an activity where I'm performing UI automation. It it is not necessarily to be inside this scope, right? It's an independent activity. I'm not performing any UI automation. The main purpose of this activity is to fetch the username and the password from the assets. So there's no UI automation related. So there is no need of this activity going into the scope. That's the first thing. And the second thing is why I have placed it on the top. So if you see the sequence, I have to enter my username here. That means I have to fetch the username and be readily in order to provide into this particular activity. Right? So you should understand where to place and how to place. It will be coming eventually, but it's a good practice to know how to do it from the day one. Okay. So now I am going to so here, okay, so let's try to look into and focus on this activity, get username or password. So if you see here, there are two things, credential manager and orchestrator. We are not going to save it in the credential manager. So our asset is coming from orchestrator. So I'm selecting from orchestrator. And what is the asset name? Right? So we have created an asset in the orchestrator. What is the asset name? Acme credential. So just click on the plus button. You can see there's an option called orchestrator. As soon as you hover on that, there is two workspaces, right? There are two workspaces that are displayed. So what is the workspace that I have connected to here? You should check. This is the workspace you have connected, and you have also created the asset in that folder. Perfect. So when you're creating an asset here and trying to access from here, it will not work out. You have to connect to the same workspace also. Okay. So this is a workspace I've connected to. So, and I've also created the asset in the same workspace. So I'm going to modern temp and this is my asset that I've created. So just select this. And now once after you select that, it will take out, it will it will take the value of the credentials and that you have to save it in a variable. Okay. That you can use it across your workflow. So now I'm gonna create a variable. Okay. So just see Acme credential is my variable name. Perfect. So I'm using the same name. Okay. Is my variable name. And now we are good. We use this activity and we have retrieved the credential from the orchestrator asset and we have saved in this variable. Now, if you see, we have to pass the variable into this particular email as well as the password. So how do you do that? So if you see here, one small thing also I want to clarify. Just click on the properties. The output is this one, Acme credential, right? So this is one more small tab called data manager. If you just click on the data manager, it will show you all the different variables that you have, right? It will show all the different variables and Acme credential is the variable that we've just created. So if you see, I am hovering on that and it says the data type of the variable. So every variable will have a type of it. So the data type is password credentials. That means it has a credential within it. So based on the type of the variable, it gets certain properties. That means, let's say if it is a string variable, right? If on a string, what all the activities that we can perform? We can concatenate a string. We can fetch the value by using substring of it. We can split the string. So these are the different methods that are available on a string. Similarly, for the password, there will be different methods that will be available. So what are the different methods that are there that we are going to see now? So if you see, I'm going to use the type into email. Okay, and here I'm gonna use the variable. First click on use the variable. And what is the variable that we are going to use? Acme credential. So as I mentioned you, this is the variable, correct? So inside the variable, these are the properties, these are the methods that it has. This method will these methods are available because this is of the type credential, right? Only credential will have username, password, and all of that. If it's a string, all these methods would be different. What are the methods that are applicable for a string? That will be available. So now you don't have to write any code. All you have to do is you have to enter the username here. So what username you want to enter? Acme credentials username. So just directly click on the username. That's it. So now I'm going to use the password here. So just go over here and then use variable. Click on the variables. You want to use the password from Acme credential. So just click on this. That's it. So we have built the login workflow. I hope this is clear. So let's quickly run this workflow end to end and see how this is working. Now I'm just going to click on run. So it's gonna compile and open the application, enter the username into email, enter the password and click on the login button. And then it has logged in into the Acme test application. So this is simple, quite simple and easy. So if you break this out into smaller steps, understand the manual steps, and then understand what activity to use, what are the different properties you have against each activity, and it's very simple. You, if you are able to correlate and build a small workflows, building the complex workflows is just a cakewalk. So now, just a small thing, create a set and use it in the application. What we have used, the activity name is get username or password. So perfect. So this is how you can build the login workflow for any application. So after you perform the login workflow, there's something called as validation, which is also very important, which we are going to see in the next session. So yes.